Getting a good quality ring seal is critical if you want an engine that's going to perform well as limit oil consumption. Gapless ring technology is something we get asked a lot about, and we're here with Keith from Total Seal Rings to talk about gapless rings and maybe debunk some of the myths when it comes to ring technology. So for a start, Keith, while Total Seal aren't the originator of the gapless ring, it seems like Total Seal has almost become synonymous with gapless rings. And for those who aren't aware of how a gapless ring works, it actually does still have a gap, but can you tell us about the construction and how they go together?
Absolutely. Our ring is a simple two-piece design. It's a thick ring and a thin ring. Thin ring goes underneath the thick. We offset the gaps 180 degrees. Very easy installation, no special tools required, and you've essentially got a gapless piston ring. We're the ones that introduced it into the automotive world in 1967. Gapless designs, just as you said, they've been around for well over 100 years. They've been used in industrial engines, pumps, compressors, transmission seals. They've been used in many, many different things, but we're the ones that brought it to the automotive world, and we're known for the gapless ring. But at the same time, I came to work for the company in 1997 and recognized that not only do we have this gapless ring, but we need to work on rings in general, all rings, conventional rings, gapless rings. How do we keep pushing this further and further and further and improving that technology?
Now, what I'll do is actually just back up a little bit, because some people might not really understand why we need a gap in the ring, and obviously part of it is the construction and getting it over the piston. And when we're working with a conventional ring, what we're doing is selecting an end gap for that ring when we're assembling the engine cold in the workshop, so that when it expands as it heats up and the engine's operating, we're going to end up with a minimal end gap. But that can be a risky proposition. Go too far, the ring butts together, we end up with catastrophic damage. So the gapless ring allows us to be a little bit more conservative with the ring end gaps of those two individual components, but because they're 180 degrees apart, doesn't give that path for the blowby to get down past the ring. Now, in terms of running a gapless ring, what sort of advantages do these offer in comparison to a conventional ring?
Well, that's a pretty easy one. The gapless ring, you're looking at multiple functions of the ring. Not only the first place we're going to go is ring seal on the intake stroke. People like to always talk about blowby numbers, how much leakage it has, and that's a key element of the gapless. It eliminates the blowby, it eliminates the leakage. At the same time, because of that, we're eliminating contamination getting into the oil pan, fuel getting into the oil pan, dilution of the engine oil, but most importantly on the internal combustion, naturally aspirated engine, the ring does all the draw on the intake stroke. Best cylinder head in the world, best camshaft, best fuel injection, best carby. All of that's great, but if the rings aren't doing their job on the intake stroke and filling the cylinders the best they can, you're leaving power on the table. So that's the real key to the gapless, is how it affects the intake stroke, and it seals and draws harder.
So essentially with a conventional ring, what you're saying there is during that intake stroke where you're creating a low pressure area inside the combustion chamber, obviously you're using that to draw air and fuel in through the intake valves, but that conventional ring can also essentially end up drawing blowby or crankcase gases back up as well, which aren't what we want.
We do not want to contaminate that clean intake charge, and because the gap is there, we do lose some of that suction, some of that draw. By blocking that gap off, that depression is increased, and you can actually see it. If you're looking at a manometer, I was a gentleman last night we were out with, they're looking at doing some Porsche stuff and some Volkswagen stuff. They're looking at numbers with conventional rings in the 5 and 6 range. With a gapless ring, they're in the 30s and 40s. That much more effective draw on the intake stroke, that much increased seal.
Okay, so that increase in the efficiency there, basically that's going to add up to an improvement in the engine's volumetric efficiency, and then we've got the reduction in the blow-by gases, and particularly with the gapless ring, we will see sort of the evidence of the effect of that gapless ring, particularly if you do a leak down test on the engine.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Typically a gapless ring motor, once everything's good and seated up, you're going to be 1%, 2% at the most, but it's very, very common to see under 1%. Gentleman here just a little before you just did a combination. He went to leak it. He said the needle didn't even move. He goes, I had to double check it to make sure I actually had the air hook to it, because nothing. He goes, it didn't even budge.
So gapless rings though, you can set up the piston with a gapless top ring or a gapless second ring. Now this sort of goes against the general consensus these days that when we're gapping our conventional rings, it's normally recommended by a lot of the piston ring manufacturers and suppliers to provide a larger gap for the second ring than the top ring. Theory behind that is that if we have the second ring gap too tight, we can end up with a pressure build-up between the rings, resulting in destabilisation of the top ring. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Baloney. It's a theory, and with all theories, we're looking at a white sheet of paper. We're looking at the theory. The theory holds water, but there are so many other events happening within that engine. There's so many different dynamic forces. To truly get an engine into ring flutter is what that's commonly known as. It takes a very, very specific set of parameters to have that happen. And it can happen. It truly can happen. But in the real world, it almost never happens. It's commonly misdiagnosed as ring flutter, but it's very rarely proven to be ring flutter. I have so many customers, so many people that run out. I'll give an example. I have a particular sprint car engine builder. These engines make almost 1,000 horsepower. They're over 9,000 RPM, almost 17-to-1 compression. He runs nothing but gapless second rings. There is no ring flutter problem in this engine. It just does not. It can't evacuate the cylinder fast enough on the exhaust side to depressurize the top ring. So there's a lot of forces that all have to align to have that happen. We go back to engines, 50, 60, 80 years ago, 100 years of internal combustion engines have always had tighter gaps on the second ring than the top. Trust me, those engines didn't have ring flutter. The theory about having to open the second ring gap up has been around since the early 70s. And to me, it is a theory. The theory holds water, but it doesn't apply to every single engine. I personally have had many engines with gapless second rings in it. I never had a ring flutter problem.
All right, so on that basis then, what would drive you to choose between a gapless top ring or a gapless second ring?
Again, simply efficiency on the intake stroke. If I'm going to do a normally aspirated engine, I'm looking at a gapless top ring. It just simply draws harder on the intake stroke. I want to get that additional power. If it's a forced induction engine, they both work equally as well. Gapless top ring or gapless second. You'd be amazed at how many big horsepower blower turbo cars I have that have gapless second rings. Their function, they're not trying to draw harder on the intake stroke. They simply want to eliminate that blow-by. They want to eliminate that contamination, especially on alcohol engines, of getting all that fuel into the engine oil, because that fuel is going to break that oil down very, very quickly, and it's going to cause a lot of wear problems in the engine and ring seal issues.
Is there also a consideration around the heat generated? Obviously, the top ring gets exposed to more heat than the second ring. Is that sort of another consideration with these blower or turbocharged engines with using a gapless second ring over a gapless top ring, or not an issue?
No, not really an issue. Where the gapless top ring really helps in those kinds of what I'll call dual purpose applications, especially, the power tour, those kinds of drag week, you guys do that same stuff. These engines where we want to be dual purpose. I want to have 40 pounds of boost, or I want to be able to throw 1,000 shot of nitrous on it. But 99% of the time, I'm not. I'm just driving it. So now I can gap the ring huge, 40, 50 thousandths. It doesn't matter. It's gapless. Put it in big and drive it. Just enjoy it. When you do use the power adder and really step on it, you've got enough end gap for the ring to expand and not butt the ring ends. Because the whole key, as you just said earlier when you started, was about butting those ring ends. You run that ring too tight, as we say, everybody knows about it. Little loose, nobody knows. Only you.
Now, if we just talk about conventional rings for a moment, we've also seen, at least over my career, 20 plus years now, the ring thickness, ring width has sort of gradually reduced over time, and there can be some advantages with that in terms of ring seal. Can you talk us through how those thinner rings can help?
Well, certainly, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a prop right here. When we're looking at the rings, we talk about the thickness. Not only are we talking about the axial height, we're talking about the radial depth, inside to outside edge. So we're reducing the rings to get rid of friction. Everything is about friction reduction. If we can come up with the materials, which we have, that allow us to use that thinner ring and still survive the heat, because the heat is the enemy. If it'll handle the heat, how thin can I go? As I reduce these dimensions, not only am I reducing the force that it puts on the cylinder wall, but as I reduce this radial dimension, I'm reducing, and I shouldn't say inducing, I mean increasing its ability to bend and follow the bore. As that cylinder can move around, especially in today's aluminum blocks, the rings have to follow it. Rings really don't like to bend and follow bores. They want to hold the shape that they were made with. So by reducing that radial dimension, it gives the ring much more ability to flex and follow the bore.
I think it's important to mention that while we may consider that our bores are round when the engine's machined, and often that's not even the case, certainly with some of the aluminium blocks, when they're faced with a very high cylinder pressure, they'll be very, very out of round, and that's where getting that ring to follow that bore irregularity can help seal.
Absolutely. As the engine heats, again, aluminum blocks, not a lot of people have done this, but take that aluminum block, if you're really into this thing, put it in a big oven and heat it up. Measure it cold, measure it hot. You'll be blown away at how much that block moves, how much it's grown, and how much it's grown out of round. So everything we can do to improve that ring seal, to give that ring that ability to follow that distortion, is going to improve that ring seal and at the same time drop that friction.
Now, you also mentioned there with the thinner rings is the ability to handle or get rid of the heat out of the ring. And we've heard issues with micro welding of the ring to the ring grooves in the piston. So where's the limiting factor? Is it down to whether we're talking about a aspirated engine or forced induction or the usage of the engine or the fuel? What's the sort of considerations?
Yeah, micro welding can occur from a few different things. One, and a lot of people don't think about it, is simply debris, dirt, rust. A lot of people don't pickle their engines when they're going to sit, especially in a humid environment. Alcohol-based engines, that attracts moisture, attracts rust horribly. You'll start to get some of that debris in there, and that debris, when it starts on a cold on a cold piece, it's going to lock that ring up. It's going to micro weld. It's going to create a hot spot in there. That's one thing people have to look at. Overly rough cylinders will do it. If you hone a really rough bore, that debris will get in between the ring and the cylinder in the groove, the ring and the groove, and create a hot spot. That's micro welding as well. But the other one is simply heat, tuning. Micro welding will generally occur during the break-in cycle when the engine's fresh. All the surfaces in this engine still have to be lapped together. The oil is the final metalworking fluid. And the same things with the ring. As good as we get the ring, as perfect as we make it, it still has to mate and seat inside the ringland. So if we've got any irregularities, high spots, hot spots, during that initial warm-up, that initial break-in, it is possible to weld the ring, which is an occurrence where the piston actually sticks to the ring, not the other way around. So it actually gets so hot it'll start to melt the aluminum in the groove. That's generally a fuel problem, too lean, too hot, not getting enough heat out of the engine, simply cooling system's not efficient enough. Those are the general reasons that will happen. And it doesn't happen that often these days. And there was a time where micro welding was a big problem, especially when they changed to like unleaded race fuels. In Australia, the supercar guys, I mean, they fought it like crazy when they went to E85. Simply not enough lubrication there. So they had to look at the oils they're using, the ring groove clearances, and how do we get that heat out of the piston. Some of them had to go to oil sprayers on the bottom side to cool the piston. But once you address those issues, micro welding's not a problem.
All right, so another topic I wanted to discuss here is the radial tension of the rings. And a lot of people think it's the tension of the rings pushing out against the bores that does the hard work of sealing, but the reality is really on the compression stroke, we're relying on the combustion pressure. So a lot of people in race engines will move to a low tension ring. The aim there, of course, is to reduce the frictional losses. Can you talk to us a little bit about the pros and cons of a low tension ring pack?
Well, when we talk about low tension, it's not only the compression ring sizes, it's the oil ring sizes. So we have to look at what we consider standard tensions. The word standard gets thrown around a lot, and it's really kind of an industry faux pas. A standard tension 3/16 oil ring is typically around 20, 22 pounds. Using the same word standard on a 3mm oil ring's about 10 pounds. So you take a small Chevy that was designed with a 5/64 oil ring in mind, or 3/16, 5/64, 5/64, 3/16 ring pack. Engine was designed around that 20-pound oil ring, and now we put a 10-pound oil ring in and add a high-volume oil pump to it where we're flooding 25% more oil in the cylinder. The tension of that oil ring just simply can't keep up. So that's the main thing to look at, is to make sure you've got the right oil ring tension for your application. Street cars and race cars, regardless of the power, have to do different things. Street cars have different jobs than race cars. So we always have to look at that oil ring tension, especially in a street car. We want to keep that engine nice and dry. So that's really the downside is keeping that engine nice and dry, finding the right ring pack that's going to keep it nice and dry and give you all the friction reduction that you can handle. I've had engines, my own personal engine, built with a very, very thin top and second ring. I wanted that bore conformability. I wanted that reduction in friction, but I still didn't go as low on the oil ring as some people do, because I simply wanted a dry engine. It's got to be happy. It's got to be dry. I'm willing to give up a couple of horsepower to make sure my street car doesn't smoke.
And I think most people would probably be in that same boat as well. Yep. All right, look, if people want to find out more about the Total Seal products, where can they go, Keith?
Come to our websites, totalseal.com. And we've also just started a podcast, so you can come to the Facebook page for Total Seal, Twitter, all of those. We've got a new podcast. Please sign up, follow it. We're interviewing, like you're interviewing with me, we're interviewing and dealing with Joe Costella and the legends of this industry. We've come Jason Line from the KB Racing team, multi-time Pro Stock champion, Pat Musey, we just did with him. And we're going to do a little bit of everybody, from sprint cars to Indy cars to Porsche restorations. So we're kind of going to be doing a little bit of the same thing you guys are doing. So come to the site.
All right, thanks a lot for your time there, Keith.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.